time is precisely 6:15. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the news edited by Anjana Dudamgada and read by Ramesh Piris. The headlines. The External Affairs Minister of India says Sri Lanka's creditors must take proactive steps. 3 members appointed to the Constitutional Council. The CAC reports outstanding performance as ASPI gains over 230 points. A month-long school holidays begin from today. The funeral of the late Dr. Sumitra Piris will be held tomorrow at Independence Square under state patronage. In news overseas, Peru's president calls for dialogue after more than 30 injured in nationwide protests. In sports, it's tennis. Norrie knocked out of the Australian Open. Now the local news in detail. President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the visiting Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar have virtually declared open the Academy for Kandyan Dancing in close proximity to the Dalada Maligawa in Kandy today. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has laid the foundation stone of the Academy for Kandyan Dancing during his visit to Sri Lanka in 2017. The Academy was built as a gift given to Sri Lanka by the Indian government and its people. Further, the handing over of 300 completed houses in Galle, Kandy and Nuwara Eliya districts under the housing project implemented in Sri Lanka with the support of the Indian government was also done virtually by the President and the Indian External Affairs Minister. Meanwhile, Dr. Jaishankar, who is in Sri Lanka for an official visit, called on President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. Joining a joint media briefing with his Sri Lankan counterpart, Minister Ali Sabri, following the meeting with President Wickremesinghe, Dr. Jaishankar said all bilateral creditors of Sri Lanka must take proactive steps to facilitate the island's recovery. President Ranil Wickremesinghe has made new appointments to the Constitutional Council. According to the President's Media Division, Dr. Pratap Ramanajam, Dr. Dilrukshi Anula Vijayasundara and Dr. Dinesha Samararatna have been appointed as members of the Council. The President's Media Division further stated that the 3 members have been appointed for a period of 3 years. India and Sri Lanka signed bilateral documents for the upward revision of ceilings prescribed in the High Impact Community Development Project Framework Agreement today. The agreement, first signed in May 2005, has doubled the individual project limit from 300 to 600 million rupees. The total HICDP funds will be doubled from 5 billion to 10 billion rupees. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Continuing with more local news. The funeral of late Dr. Sumitra Piris will be held tomorrow at 4 p.m. at Independence Square under state patronage. The country's first female filmmaker, Dr. Sumitra Piris, passed away on Thursday while receiving treatment at a private hospital in Colombo. Born in 1934, she was aged 88 years at the time of her demise. She was the beloved wife of the legendary pioneer of authentic Sri Lankan cinema, late Sir Lester James Piris. She started off her own cinema direct debut with her first film, Gahanu Lamai, which was a box office hit and managed to bag many awards at the film festivals of the time, and her second film, Ganga Adara, was also another box office hit. The remains of late Dr. Sumitra Piris are placed at Gower Street, Colombo 5. Sabaki Janabalawege MP Mujibur Rahman informed Parliament that he will resign as an MP to contest for the post mayor of Colombo Municipal Council in the local government election. Due to his resignation, the party has decided to appoint A.H.F. Fauzi to the vacant parliamentary seat. And that concludes local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to the main news story, the Ministry of Education has announced that the second phase of the third term of all Sinhala and Tamil government and government-approved private schools will end today. Meanwhile, the second phase of the third school term for all government and government-approved Muslim schools will end on the 6th of February. According to the Education Ministry, the third phase of the third school term is scheduled to commence on the 20th of February for all government and government-approved private schools. And that came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya. Brush your teeth twice a day for healthy teeth and gums. Supiriviki and Kakulu, your trusted brands in oral care for many years.
Supiriviki Ayurvedic toothpaste for adults. Kakulu Ayurvedic toothpaste for kids. 9 Ayurvedic ingredients of Supiriviki will protect your teeth and strengthen your gums. Supiriviki and Kakulu, products from Siddhalepa.
In this evening's watch night, the NWSDP announced that a 9-hour water cut will be enforced from 11 a.m. tomorrow in Colombo, Tehibala, Mount Lavinia, Kotte, Kadwela Municipal Council areas, Maharagama, Boralasgama, Kolonava Urban Council areas, Kotikawata and Muleriava Pradesh Sabha areas, Ratmalana and Katubade areas. And that came to you in Watch Night. A bulletin of world news is next.
Coming up, world news.
Moving on to the bulletin of world news, first the headlines. Peru's president calls for dialogue after more than 30 injured in nationwide protests. India on alert for new variants as COVID wave sweeps China. Hundreds evacuated in Seoul due to South Korea's slum fire. Now the world news in detail. Peru's President Dina Boluarte has called for dialogue after clashes between protesters and police during nationwide demonstrations left 1 person dead and 30 injured. Boluarte said at a press conference on Thursday evening after clashes on the streets of the capital Lima, where thousands of protesters from across the country faced a massive show of force by local police. India's health minister has advised the public to take precautions against COVID-19, including getting vaccinated and wearing masks, as the country remains on alert for potential new variants that could emerge from the wave of infections sweeping neighboring China. Health Minister Manasukh Mandavia told Parliament that India would begin randomly testing 2% of international travellers arriving at the country's airports after he asked regional authorities to send positive samples to laboratories monitoring for new COVID strains. Hundreds of people have had to be evacuated after a fire broke out in a shanty town in South Korea's capital Seoul. Roughly 60 homes are reported to have been destroyed in Friday's morning's blaze in Gwaryong village. There have been no reports of death or injuries. South Korean media has described the area of closely packed makeshift homes as the capital's last remaining slum. It took more than 900 firefighters and several helicopters 5 hours to put out the blaze. To conclude this bulletin of world news, headlines once again. Peru's president calls for dialogue after more than 30 injured in nationwide protests. India on alert for new variants as COVID wave sweeps China. Hundreds evacuated in Seoul due to South Korea's slum fire. And that concludes World News.
Development News.
Moving on to development news, Port City Colombo recently welcomed a delegation of senior representatives from the Thai Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce, the Sri Lanka Thailand Business Council and Embassy of Iran. The objective of the visit was to explore potential opportunities for foreign direct investment within the project. The delegations were received by the senior management team of the Port City Colombo Private Limited, the Sri Lanka's largest mixed development project spanning 269 hectares of reclaimed land in the heart of Colombo, and is intended to be a new economic hub for the country, providing globally attractive commercial and residential opportunities. And that was Development News.
Sports News is brought to you by
Sampath Bank, we present your future.
In sports news, it's tennis. British men's number 1 Cameron Norrie is out of the Australian Open after losing to rising star Cheryl Hecker. Norrie, seeded 11th, had been aiming to knock off another notable career milestone by reaching the last 16 at Melbourne Park for the first time. He led by 2 sets to 1 before Czech Lehecka fought back to win 6-7, 8-10, 6-3, 3-6, 6-1, 6-4 in the third round. Meanwhile, Andy Murray says finishing his second round match at the Australian Open at 4 a.m. was a farce. The 35-year-old's arduous 5-set win over home favourite Thanasi Kokkinakis took 5 hours 40 minutes. That followed Murray's first round win on Tuesday, when the Briton sealed victory in 4 hours 49 minutes against Italian Matteo Berrettini. And that was sports news.
Go ekak thiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
In business news, recognizing one of DFCC Bank's most effective social media marketing campaigns, which also resonated well with their customers as the content was based on a customer's real-life experience with the bank, DFCC Bank won the Gold Award for Best Social Media Content at the 11th ACF Asian Leaders Awards, competing against countries in South Asia. DFCC Bank received this award for the unique digital media marketing campaign it launched, coinciding with Customer Service Week. And that was business news.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekak thiyana youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Economic news, courtesy of... For the 5th consecutive year, LOLC is awarded People's Financial Services Brand of the Year at the 2022 Slim Kantar People's Awards. As the People's Financial Services Brand of the Year, LOLC continues to place the customer first. And this has won the hearts, minds and trust of Sri Lankans, with yet another prestigious award as proof of this lasting commitment. LOLC, imagine the possibilities.
In economic news, Colombo Stock Exchange All-Share Price Index showed outstanding performance, gaining 233.23 points at the end of trading today at close at 8,718.15 points. As a percentage, this is an increase of 2.75%. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 index also moved up by 88.45 points to close at 2,120.22 points at the end of trading today. This is an increase of 3.36%. Today's market turnover is recorded at 2.24 billion rupees. And that was economic news. The weather report is next.
LOLC Finance is taking the power of innovation to the next level, winning 5 golds at the Technovation Awards 2022, leading the digital revolution with cutting-edge interbanking digital payments. LOLC Finance claims the overall gold award whilst also claiming an extraordinary victory in digital banking.
Weather report.
And finally, moving on to the weather report, the Department of Meteorology forecasts the prevailing dry weather condition in the eastern and Uva provinces to change during the next few days. Showers or thundershowers will occur at times in the Uva, southern and eastern provinces. Fairly heavy showers above 75 millimeters can be expected at some places in the Uva province and in the Ampara and Patiklau districts. Showers or thundershowers will occur at several places in the Sabaragamuwa, western, central and northwestern provinces during the afternoon or night. And that was the weather report. And to conclude this news broadcast, a recap of the main news headlines. The External Affairs Minister of India says Sri Lanka's creditors must take proactive steps. 3 members appointed to the Constitutional Council. The CSA reports outstanding performance as ASPI gains over 230 points. A month-long school holidays begins from today. The funeral of the late Dr. Sumitra Peris will be held tomorrow at the Independence Patronage. In news overseas, Peru's president calls for dialogue after more than 30 injured in nationwide protests. In sports, it's tennis. Norrie knocked out of the Australian Open. And with that, we conclude this news broadcast from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.